All right, welcome to a version of the Blunt Force Conservative podcast. I wanted to take the time this Monday. First of all, congrats to President Trump on what appears to be a path to bringing peace in the Middle East. Got up early this morning and began watching the comments over in the Middle East, but I wanted to take this time to give my commentary on what was one of the more deadly weekends in the state of Mississippi in recent memory. We had a number of violent events, all seem to be located in areas of high schools and HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. I will note, and to tie this into a political thing, all of these are in Benny Thompson's district. I will be interested to hear if Benny Thompson decides to make any type of comments on what he believes the cost of this is. I do think that one of the things that he'll look at is probably asking for more federal funds to be brought in. But I wanted to update those outside the state on what we were actually looking at this weekend because there's not a lot of national media drawing attention to this. I hope that some of the national media ends up picking up on it because it was pretty significant this weekend. So just to give some idea of these key incidents, the first I wanted to comment on was at Leland High School in Washington County, and this was around midnight on October 11th, and it was around Leland High School's homecoming football game against Charleston High School. Uh, this incident right here at the scene, there were four victims that were killed: an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 41-year-old, and a 25-year-old. The response included an MBI, Mississippi Highway Patrol, and ATF. No arrests have been reported in this incident this time, and it's from news reports and press accounts and public affairs. It seems that the FBI and Cash Patel and the FBI Jackson Field office, where I retired out of, are involved in looking into these events and providing necessary resources to these law enforcement agencies to help bring some closure to these families and citizens in these areas. The other was at Heidelberg High School in Jasper County. This was on October 10th. And during the homecoming weekend, a gunfire broke out on the school grounds that Friday night, killing two people, one an expectant mother and wounding at least one other. An 18-year-old, Tyler Jared Goodlow, was arrested as a person of interest and charged in connection with the shooting. Jones County Sheriff's Department confirmed his detention. The shooting disrupted campus festivities, prompting a multi-agency lockdown. Next, and this just keeps going on, Rolling Fork shooting. This is in Sharkey County. A South Delta High School's post-game gathering. One man was injured in a shooting Friday night. No fatalities were reported, thankfully. And they've announced that there are two arrests, but they haven't given the details out yet. That's the Sharkey County Sheriff's Office advised that they've announced at least two arrests in that event. Then we move on to the HBCUs. Why do I say HBCUs? I'm not singling them out because of their race. That's how they want to be referred to, as HBCUs. We've got Alcorn State University shooting. That's in Lorman and Claiborne County area. And around 6:30 p.m. Saturday night, one person was killed and two others wounded during homecoming events. No arrests have been made in that incident, according to the Mississippi Department of Public Safety. Then we have a university that is notorious that when they have their homecoming, there's usually something that's going to happen there. That's at Jackson State University in Hinds County. This was on October 11th. In the details here, a tailgate area outside the football stadium during homecoming, a juvenile was shot in the abdomen. Multiple vehicles were set on fire amid the chaos. No fatalities were reported. Jackson State Police and Hinds County Sheriff's Office responded with MBI leading, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. A child was hospitalized and suspect details are being withheld. So total summary, we have nine, this was as of the last query, we have 9 confirmed deaths, 4 in Leland, 2 in Heidelberg, 1 at Alcorn State, 2 unspecified and aggravated reports, 30 plus injured across the state. And some sources are citing 8 deaths, likely pre-final tallies. Vigils are being held out there right now. We've got statements coming out from, state and local law enforcement and the FBI providing some necessary assistance they can do through the assistance to law enforcement that they can provide there. If it's not a federal violation, the FBI is going to be very limited in hands-on investigation of what they can do, but they can provide necessary resources, ballistics, helping with the crime scene investigations, doing some type of analysis either at the FBI laboratory or through the behavioral science unit. But I wanted to also take the time to let's see what some of our leaders in the state of Mississippi are saying about this. So let's take a look. Mississippi GOP. We're going to hit their site. Let's pop it up here on the screen. Give it a second to load. There we go. So I commend the Mississippi GOP. I do know, or at least I think I know, who handles their X account, Twitter account. And if you take a look there, you'll see that they've reposted the call from the FBI Jackson field office. They've established a digital media tips website to collect multimedia view. In other words, people got their cell phones out or anything like that, that they can send that into the FBI, and the FBI will help, compile that information for state and local law enforcement. The next tab, let's see if it will show here. And that is Benny Thompson's page. So let's scroll around and look. And apparently Benny Thompson thought it was more important to talk about Indigenous Peoples Day than to comment on the death and destruction that's been going on in his district. For those of you that are unaware of how the districts are set up here in Mississippi, we have 4 districts. And if you look, I-55 runs right through the middle, north and south of the state of Mississippi. Almost everything to the left is Benny Thompson's area. And that keeps getting expanded. And we don't really get a justifiable reason for that, since it is the Mississippi Republicans that have the supermajority in the Senate under the leadership of our Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann that make those decisions, that put forth that information. All right, let's take a look at the next page. We've got my congressman, and that's Michael Guest. And I see some things about Homeland Security, and at least he and his wife are praying for these individuals, the shootings in Leland, Alcorn State, and Jackson State this weekend. So at least he's recognizing, unlike Benny Thompson, that we did have some serious events here. What I'll be interested in is how they help facilitate any federal resources or drawing some federal attention. And I've got some comments I'm going to make here in a minute about what I think are some of the sources over time for this malfeasance that's going on in the state of Mississippi. Now we're looking at Trent Kelly. He's up in the Northern District. He is most closely adjacent to the starting point of Benny Thompson's district. Not really. Let's see. Nope. We see something about the shutdown and something about Mississippi's first congressional district. So nothing about the horrific events that happened in Mississippi there. Let's take a look at our other representative. That would be Mike Eazell. He won the district over Steve Palazzo that used to be in that position. And he's talking about shutdown stuff and that our service members, ensuring that military members get paid. I'm all for the military members getting paid. If Congress can find the money to pay themselves, they should be able to find the money to pay our military members. The rest of the federal government, hey, it's tough. I went through multiple shutdowns. The last one was about 35 days that I went through, and I was able to survive it. I think that if you take advantage of the offers from your credit lenders, mortgage lenders, credit card companies, you can make it through there. The next is Cindy Hyde Smith, who is up for re-election in 2026. And I am seeing some comments about the hostages, which that's a good thing. And I'm seeing something about the Senate's passage of the National Defense Authorization Act, but nothing about what's going on in her home state. Now, another individual here, Roger Wicker. I doubt very seriously Roger's going to have anything up there. I'm not sure who handles his media stuff. I've called him out repeatedly about it. I doubt very seriously he's the one that's handling it. So we're not seeing anything about this terrific event. All right, let's go to the next one. This is Lynn Fitch. Lynn is our Attorney General down here in Mississippi, and I commend her for taking the time to recognize the senseless shootings in Leland and across Mississippi this weekend. I have sent a text out to someone on her staff to ask if they are involved in the investigation. They should be. I'm going to bet that they are. Maybe they just haven't put the full statement out yet. Now let's take a look at our governor. And of course, our governor was right on top of this. I do like Tate Reeves. He does take the time to look into these things. I hope that he is going to continue to push for accountability as to how we're going to hold people responsible for this. It's going to take a long haul. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. And then finally, let's take a look at our favorite Lieutenant Governor, Delbert Hosemann, the guy that I said, I've talked to several former governors where I've asked them if I had to convict Delbert Hosemann of being a conservative, would I have enough evidence in court to convict him of that? And they just kind of laughed about it. But he at least did say something about the senseless violence. I will commend him on that. Now, what are you going to do about it? Are you any additional attention to this? So one of the things I wanted to bring up here about what's causing this. So we have had our share of problems here in the state of Mississippi. And one of those problems has been our education. So one of the things I pointed out when I first started speaking out at school boards was the fact that, at 61, I've just got to wear these glasses. Mississippi famously, from 2013 to 2022, we had a state superintendent of education. Her name was Carrie Wright. And Carrie Wright, remember, we're Mississippi. This is not California. This is not New York State. It's not Washington State. It's not even the state of Florida. We had the highest paid state school superintendent in the nation. No other state paid their school superintendent as much as we paid Carrie Wright when she was in charge here. She was making, I believe, around $207,000 a year, maybe more than that, during her tenure. I went back and looked at her history where she came in from the DC and the Baltimore school districts. She did a horrible job up there. I don't know whose decision it was to bring her down here, but she served from 2013 to 2022. Now, if we take a look at where we ranked, so the year before she became our state school superintendent, 2012, we were ranked 49. 2013, 49. 2014, 48. 2015, 46. 2016, 45th, 2017, 42nd, 2018, 40th. 2019, we went back up, 41st. 2020, we went to 38th, but that graduation rate, I think a lot of students were pushed through because our graduation rate went to 84%, and that's not really ever been that high. 2021, it moved back up to 39th. 2022, 39th. 2023, 32nd. Now, the latest that we've seen, we've moved into 16th preliminary. And I think that a lot of that has to do with some of the educational accountability. Now, why do I bring up the education system? Because what we have in the Delta, in the Mississippi Delta, is a history of kids that aren't attending school, or when they're in school, they're just being shuttled through and handed a diploma with no skill sets, no foreseeable avenues to enter commerce, to get a job that can take care of themselves. We've also got something that's been systemic from the days of the passage of the Civil Rights Act, and that is where money has been given to families and really promoted. Uh, and Clay Edwards talked about this on WYAB this morning. If you get a chance, go to @SaveJackson, SAVEJXN, and check out his comments about this, or go back and listen to his show from this morning. He was really spot on of the problem that we have of these, one parent households where the father is not even involved in it. And what we end up doing is rewarding these mothers who have more and more kids. We've got to have some accountability here. One of the things that I'll credit Bill Clinton for doing during his tenure as president from 1992 to 2000 is that he signed on to the Republicans' Welfare to Work Act, which forced people to go out and actually get a job, to actually be able to provide for their families, uh, rather than the government ended up taking the place of that. It's still sad to see that today. I had to interview somebody in one of my investigations that was up for a position in government. I'm not going to say whether it was state or federal or local government, but this individual had about 4 or 5 kids, no father to speak of, never married, no father involved in paying for any of the child support, back home living with her mother, raising all these kids. And then, of course, the grandmother ends up raising the kid. And, this individual bounced from job to job to job to job to job, but then is looking to have, federal, state, or local government pick her up for a position. Now, I don't have any say so or any input over that. I just thought it was an interesting observation that this individual who clearly was not having the type of support, home support, that she needed, that she was, hopefully this job that she got, it'd be life changing. The dollar amount on it was not high by today's standards, high for Mississippi, but hopefully this is something that, getting gainful employment. I will commend the individual for at least trying to better herself. But what we need to do is start holding these fathers accountable. Now, an idea that I heard, and I think I heard it on Clay's show today, I was listening to him when I was at the gym this morning, was mandatory paternity test, mandatory DNA test born. The mom has to identify who she believes the father is, and then you have to do a DNA test. If that person's tied to it, they're legally bound, financially bound to help take care of that child, whether they get married or not. But something like that needs to happen. That's part of that accountability. The other is we as a community need to start holding each of our children accountable for their actions. So, when I was growing up in the 60s and the 70s, during that time, if there was a pregnancy, you got married. That was the way it went. You had to take responsibility for taking care of that child. I think we need to get back to something like that. It's going to take a while to do it, much like the turnaround in the Mississippi education. We've now got a little better leadership in there. We're starting to see some changes at the school boards. I haven't spoken there in a while. I need to check back in with them. There were some serious problems that were being exposed, which I actually think that the overreach of government during this COVID pandemic, which wasn't a pandemic, I think that it actually was a blessing because it helped us focus and expose some of the problems we were having in the school system. The fact that they weren't teaching civics, the fact that our children didn't understand, what the melting pot society is, with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, a lot of our, U.S. history, good and bad, they were unaware of that. It also pointed out this push for this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. And then when they tried to sneak it back in under into environmental social governance, ESG, or emotional ESL. I think it was ESL, emotional social. I can't remember what the L stood for, but it just turned out to be the same DEI stuff. And a lot of us parents took the time to go to these school board meetings and call them out over it. To the even the putting, having obscene and pornographic material in our school libraries. It was a chore trying to get that stuff out. So I think once we start holding these people accountable, I also think that we need to look at holding our educators accountable. I remember there was one time I spoke before the school board, and I was speaking about the issues of these obscene and pornographic materials, these books that were in our libraries for our underage youth, books that if an adult handed to another person, I as a federal agent with the FBI could have actually sought an arrest warrant for that individual for distribution of obscene and pornographic material to a minor. But for some reason, we're allowing our school libraries to house these books. So I think once we start holding those educators responsible, it's the same thing I called out for when Delbert Hosemann and the Republicans were pushing for an across the board $5,000 a year increase in salaries for our educators, these meritless pay raises. Why are we giving people raises that haven't earned anything? If you're worth that, we pay for it. It just astounds me that we were pushing for that, because that also encumbered the citizens of Mississippi. When you increase the educator's salary by $5,000, now the public employees retirement system, PERS, here in the state, now the state's responsible for an increase in the amount of their retirement when they leave. But there's no accountability there. The worst teacher and the best teacher all get the same pay raise. And if I felt like I was the best teacher, I'd have a problem with that someone who didn't have to do the heavy lifting like I did was getting rewarded. But that's just something that's indicative of where we're not giving accountability in our schools, in our neighborhoods. Where are the churches? I haven't heard any of the churches in Benny Thompson's district raising Cain about all this murder and mayhem that's going on in their schools at these events. Where are these people speaking out? I've got a lot of questions, and hopefully we're going to have some citizens out there doing what I always advocate. If you've ever listened to me on the radio, on television, here on this podcast, exercise that First Amendment right to petition and seek redress. Benny Thompson's office should be flooded with calls. What have you done to keep something like this from happening? Because it's getting worse, and it's getting worse in his districts. So that'll be interesting as we look into it. As we sign off here, I want to again commend President Trump and his team and Marco Rubio and everybody that played a role in bringing back those hostages. And hopefully they'll get all their remains back. I hope that they're able to rid Hamas out of the Gaza Strip, that we start seeing those individuals being able. You want to talk about free Palestine? The best way to free Palestine is through getting them engaged in commerce, and doing so without the oppression of Hamas. That's hopefully that's something that President Trump is able to continue to push, not just the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip, but also to make sure that Hamas is never, ever, never seen again. Well, thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. We'll try to do some of these quick hits here and there. I want to do more of these often. I usually, when I'm listening to other people's podcasts or I'm listening to the news or something pops up, I've got a notepad that I keep with me and I make some notes, and I always plan on bringing them up during the podcast. But by the time I get to putting forth a full-length podcast, usually that news is subsided. But again, thank you for listening in. Thank you for those of you that helped pull the Alabama Crimson Tide in their game this past weekend over Missouri. And we've got another tough one, another ranked team coming to Tuscaloosa here. It's a night game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Hope you tune in.